You shared that studies show that around 66% of children in the US are behind on reading, that 70% of those never catch up, and that about half of adults in the US read below a sixth grade level.
When I first learned those, it felt like a gut punch. I really just hope that they aren't discouraged in that first moment.
Welcome back to the OpenEd podcast. I am here today with Tony Mickelsen, a digital marketing expert, husband and father of 4 children, and chief marketing officer at Savvy Learning, the #1 online high-dosage tutoring option for kids and families. And joining us today is also Jen Johnson, associate director of the OpenEd curriculum team, mom of 3 littles, just starting her open education journey with her first kindergartner in the fall. Passionate about reading and education, especially in the early years. And I'm Andrea Fife, your sometimes host. One of the top questions that families new to open education ask is, how can I tell if my student is on level? While there's no one standard we'd expect all students to be measured against, the question comes from a really important place. Regardless of their approach to education, parents want to know the educational choices they've made are giving their children the skills they'll need to succeed in life. And high atop that list for many parents is the ability to read. If this sounds like you as a parent, then stick around as we dive into the learning gaps that parents may observe in areas like reading and some of the tools available to address those gaps. Tony, to get started, I'd love to hear a bit more about your background. Can you share with us some of your life experiences that have made you so passionate about education?
Of course, yeah. Thanks for having me on. A little bit about me. Today I'm a father of 4, and I love being a dad. I just love it. And with that comes a lot of teaching just throughout the day. And I really do enjoy that. But, earlier in my life, I did, go to school and college, and I was one of those who just loved being in class. Like I loved school in general. After college, I got into marketing. Last year, I joined this company, Savvy Learning, which was actually my first time in the education industry. And it came at the perfect time in my life because my oldest son was turning 5 and now he's 6 and he's doing so well with reading, and that's just been such a fun experience. And so I'm very excited to be in the education industry at this time because that's the stage my kids are getting into.
That's amazing. Jen, how about you? As a parent and an educator, what comes to mind when you think about reading or early reading or struggling readers?
Yeah, I really focused on reading in my education in college, but it wasn't, I feel like, until I was actually a teacher. I taught kindergarten for a little bit and really got to experience students learning to read for the first time, and that was super fun. The gaps that students had were really overcomable at that age. And then I transitioned to 4th grade and got to see those students who had struggled in those early years, and all of a sudden those struggles and those needs became so much more apparent. In the education world, sometimes they say you transfer from learning how to read to reading to learn content material at about that 4th grade level. And those students who were struggling, really, then it started to affect every other aspect of their education. Math, they needed to read, science and social studies. And so I became a lot more passionate, I think, at that point when I started to see how those students struggled at that age.
So, Jenna, just while we're waiting, I'm curious, I'd love to hear a little bit more about your teaching experience, how you got started into that.
Yeah, I always wanted to be a teacher. Like, I don't even know, from a young age. I've always loved reading, and so I went back and forth on whether I wanted to do like high school literature type of stuff or elementary, and I ended up focusing on elementary and absolutely loved it. But also, and then I got out of the education world partially because of COVID and having kids, but also the joy of teaching was kind of, it was very bureaucratic and focused on test scores, and I felt like I was being asked to just make sure that I got the right test score rather than teaching students. But to be completely honest, I was a little skeptical of homeschoolers as a classroom teacher because a lot of the homeschoolers that came in were, behind level or whatever. And so it got a bad rap. But then I found OpenEd and started to see how it can really be done right and how the cool experiences that students have. So it's been kind of fun to open my horizons a little bit to see the benefits of, the public school system, but also what parents can do on their own too.
Was OpenEd around before COVID? And if so, how did it change?
Yeah. So it was my tech high for a long time, and then transitioned to OpenEd just this last year.
Tony, you shared an interesting statistic with me that I would love to explore. You shared that studies show that around 66% of children in the US are behind on reading, that 70% of those never catch up, and that about half of adults in the US read below a sixth grade level. How do you hope parents react when they hear those statistics?
I really just hope that they aren't discouraged in that first moment. I mean, they're sobering statistics. When I first learned those, it felt like a gut punch. Thinking about what is, in a way, a reading crisis or a literacy crisis in America. And it definitely gets talked about, especially in education circles. But I think with the average parent, that's largely an unknown. And so to hear that can understandably be scary. Through this conversation and many other conversations, I hope parents find comfort in that there are a lot of options out there for them. This movement with there being so many new options for parents and optimizing their child's education, in that I hope they find comfort. Looking at it with that glass half full, I hope that statistic gets them to take action and not just to accept complacency. I hope that, the teachers at public school are that they got it covered. As parents, I think we need to be more aware. And so I hope also those statistics just increase their awareness and their desire to be aware of all the other things that go along with this.
I think that's so helpful. And I think that for a family who's chosen open education, they've already decided to take some of these things into their own hands to say, I want to be personally involved with my child's education. I want to know where they are. I want to know where they're headed. Like I mentioned in the intro to the episode, it's a really common question that we get is that families newer to open education will want to know, how do I know if my student is behind? Without the kind of wraparound structure of a structured classroom or a teacher guiding the education of 25 students in a standard way, I'm curious, Jen, what you would share are some tools that you've come across or strategies that families can use if that's where they're standing right now. Is I'm hearing this statistic. Tony shared with me, wow, a lot of students are behind, and they're starting to wonder, is that my student? For an open education parent, where would you suggest that they start?
I think one of the first thoughts I had as you were speaking, Tony, is that reading is a skill. And I think so often we think of reading as just, your student likes to do it or they don't like to do it. At least in those beginning years or those beginning skills, it's something that I believe all students can learn. And they may not love it. Some students pick it up faster than others, or they'll pick it up on their own. But understanding that no matter where your student is at, that they can do it, that you might need to deploy different strategies, right? Not all students will learn to read the same way or with the same instruction. And so understanding it is possible, but that you can be creative in the way that you do it. And I think there's so many great resources out there that provide that instruction. For me, I'm a big believer in assessment, not in the formal sense necessarily, but in just coming back regularly and checking in where your student is at. I think an informed parent is the best parent, right? And if you're just coming back in and checking in with your student, you can use an online program, you can use a tutor, but for you to personally hear your student read frequently, I think is a great way for you to see if they're progressing. And if they're not reading by 5 or 6, that's okay. But if you're seeing progress, then that's a great indicator that they're making gains and that they will get there.
I love that. That's great. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Tony.
I love that because it's really a problem around access to tools, access to information, obviously. And so as a parent, it's intimidating, taking the leap, making a change to your education setup. But as I've entered this education industry, I've been so impressed with everyone's enthusiasm to talk about the solutions, talk about the new options parents have, and there are so many out there. It seems like every single day I'm learning of a new way to participate in this open education movement. And when I started, my wife and I were thinking of leaving public school and going into homeschool, and we had no idea how to even begin that process. And my wife has an early education degree, so you'd think that it'd be easy for us. But as time has gone on and we've done more and more research, it's like, wow, there are so many options. And that's a good thing because every situation is unique, every child is unique. And so I'm just so impressed with this industry and how they are helping parents have access to options.
Yeah, it is really, really powerful when you're able to take a step back and say whatever it is that the parent wants to use, whether it's a combination of public school, private school, charter school, home education, online, any of these things. When a parent's empowered to say, I see the way that I want to do it and we can get access to the tools, then something really powerful definitely starts to happen there. Kind of coming at this reading, or particularly maybe early reading struggles from a little bit of a different angle. I've definitely seen it sometimes in the classroom. I've heard it sometimes when parents are talking about the struggles that they're having at home, working with their own kids. Sometimes we have a tendency, maybe too often, we have a tendency to kind of mix up behavior and academic struggles, and we maybe misperceive root causes there. What dangers do you see, Tony, when parents or educators are maybe too strongly associating behavior and learning ability? What are the dangers or pitfalls of that approach?
Boy, this is a big one. As a parent, it's hard for me to know, is this behavior issue, say like, my son is struggling to make friends at school. Is this due to environmental things? Like, are there things that I'm not doing as a parent to improve his environment to then go and make friends at school? Or is it something related to academic success? Like, I just don't know as a parent. And so I think as far as pitfalls around this, again, parents, speaking from the parent perspective, I think if they can just subscribe to conversations online or communities online where it is okay to talk about these sort of things. It's not easy to talk about things like, wow, my son's really struggling to make friends at school. Then as a parent, you need to go find the cause of that so you can, help your child. Is it an academic cause? Is it an environmental cause? Is it something else? Like, is it, something like a learning disability or, a social disability that my child has? Like, I have no idea as a parent. Where do I go to find information? And so finding those communities where it's okay to ask those questions, to be vulnerable. I think that is so important. If you could have that, I think it's off to the races. Let's go understand this problem and solve it. Hopefully.
That's great. Jen, have you seen any examples of this in your classroom or maybe working with your own kids at home? Or I know that really can be challenging to try to identify the root cause of something that you want to have a positive impact on.
I think, especially as we're talking those early readers, there's this big push down of skills moving down in grade levels and what we expect of students. And sometimes I think that's to the detriment of these students, that a 5-year-old is expected to sit in a classroom for 6 hours a day. And if they aren't doing that, then they're labeled with a learning disability or a behavioral issue. And I think we need to recognize what's developmentally appropriate for our students. And so first of all, I think it's separating those two issues, especially if you're talking about just teaching your kids to read, is really recognizing, is this an actual behavioral issue or are they just a 6-year-old boy? And we need to adjust the way that we're teaching them or helping them to learn. I know with my own daughter, I do kind of a little co-op preschool with her and some friends. And if I sit there with her and as the teacher role, when I'm her preschool teacher and I tell her to do something, the fight back is real. And she throws fits and things. If she wants to learn to write on her own and she wants to write a letter to her grandma or something, then suddenly she's open to feedback and she goes and she does it on her own. And if I suggest a different way to spell something, she's all about that. And I think finding the right way, that's one of the beauties of open education, right, is that we can adjust our teaching to the right moment for our students. And we don't have to expect it that this is writing time and you will learn to write or you will learn to read right now in the way that I dictate. And instead we can go based off of our students' interests and find a way to feed it without labeling them as having a behavioral issue or a learning issue too early on.
I have a question, Jen, about that. With your experience as a teacher, how common is it for improvement in reading to help that child overcome that behavioral issue that they're experiencing at that time? Like, how often is reading success a key that unlocks progress with these larger life issues that children are bound to experience?
That's such a great question, and I won't throw out any kind of statistics without going and doing the research. But I think you hit a great point, Tony, that sometimes there's also that lack of confidence, right, in our students. And when they start to feel confident in a skill, then their need for attention or for to pull away the attention from something they're not good at, they can receive that positive praise in a good way, right? We hear behavioral experts that kids just want attention, whether it's positive or negative. Sometimes it doesn't matter to them. And so if we can help them feel confident in their reading ability and they're getting that attention in praise and in feeling like they're doing well, then maybe, like you mentioned, that behavioral issue can kind of resolve itself because they have something to celebrate on their own.
It almost seems like the relationship between student and teacher is potentially the bigger unlock than say just the academic progress. Like obviously the academic progress is very important, but that relationship that's a part of it with the coach, that seems to be a huge aspect. And in my job, I talk to parents all the time, and it's usually in the context of, a child is struggling with reading, or the mom is a really busy homeschool parent, and maybe the child isn't struggling, but they're just struggling to manage the schedule of homeschool workload. And so I'm talking to these parents all the time, and coming into this education industry, I was probably a little too laser focused on reading improvements, math improvements, academics, curriculum. And what started to open my eyes was as I'm talking to parents about, these academic things, because hey, that's what we do at the end of the day at Savvy. We help kids with reading and math. But the conversations almost every single time go to something like, wow, the improvement we've made on reading has improved my relationship with my daughter so much. Because now I'm not nagging her so much about the whole reading thing, or, it's the kid comes home happier from school because they feel like they're actually making progress on, something like reading or math, and they're making friends more easily at school. And so I hear these stories all day, every day. And one, it makes my job so much fun. I love hearing about these children making progress, but it's really changing my perspective as a parent of how these things are so closely connected. And I'm having a better understanding what these kids need developmentally. I wish I had that education degree where I understand the science of child development and their brains and how reading impacts their social lives. But as a parent, I don't know any of that. I have no idea. But getting to talk to hundreds of parents has really opened my eyes to how deeply connected these things are.
Yeah, I think reading is connected to everything. I mean, reading language connects our world, and the ability to read is the ability to interact, to not just always have to say it out loud, the ability for someone to write something down and for you to access that knowledge at a later time. And it's just the foundation of civilization is the ability to exchange information via the written world. And so when you struggle to do that foundational skill that the world is built on, I can't see how it wouldn't impact you socially. You watch kids who they'll shy away from volunteering to read something, and it's not just at school. I do a lot of things in the theater world, and I've worked with some older teens or even adults who struggle with dyslexia, and watching how that impacts their ability to enter a world they love, which is the world of theater, watching them need to go pull somebody aside before the rehearsal starts and say, hey, just so you know, I actually am not a very strong reader. When you tell me what page number we're going to be on, would you mind pausing for a minute so that I can make sure I'm where everyone else is? It's going to take me longer to find my place in the script, and that type of thing. I admire the strength to say I have this struggle, because it's almost impossible to be a struggling reader and not have it be a part of your social life or professional life or personal life, any of those kinds of things. So whether you're a 5-year-old or whether you're an adult who still has reading struggles, reading it's just at the center of everything. If you can read, you can learn anything. And if you're a struggling reader, there is so much of the world that is based on that. Thankfully, there's also a ton of the world that is not. And there are so many places where struggling readers can thrive too. Thankfully, we are not all one experience, but I can think of few things that are more interconnected in life than the skill of reading.
And I think that's where it's such a balancing act, right? We talked about that relationship with the teacher or the parent and going at your student's pace. And I 100% want to advocate for that, but also advocate for making sure every student has the quality reading instruction and opportunity to develop that skill so that it doesn't follow them. Like you mentioned, Andrea, they can progress in life however they choose with that solid foundation. And so I think that's such a balancing act for us as parents and educators to ensure that we respect their pacing and we respect their learning styles while ensuring that we do our part to give them a solid foundation there for them to progress.
Tony's mentioned that there are so many tools in the space, just constantly new options for parents or educators to implement. I think this goes, hand in hand with the fact that educating at home is on the rise, very much so. And so as we see more parents choosing to do this at home, we see more tools tailored toward supporting the parent who is choosing to do this at home. Jen, I know you work with a lot of families who are at the beginning of that journey trying to decide what is the best tool for them. Are there any common concerns or common threads that you hear parents expressing when they're trying to decide what is the right tool to fit my child?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest things is understanding what your family's needs and desires are, right? Some want it to be more based, some want it to be more paper pencil or interactive. And so understanding what your goals are as a family and what your student's learning style is. I also see a lot of parents who, there are those educational companies, I won't name names, but they say that they're an educational resource, and then families get in there and realize their student is doing a lot of games and that they're not actually learning the content. And so that's a concern that parents see a lot. Is my student actually going to progress here, or are they going to play games that are centered around letters or whatever, but really they're just having fun? And so making sure that we find that balance. So we want our students to be motivated to do it, but also that they have that basis of learning. Some other concerns are standards-based. Some families want them to be standards-based and others don't. And so again, it's just aligning your values and understanding what your goals are. Our team does a lot to try to vet those and find the resources that families like, but also going to each other. Really, that's where we see our parents finding the most value is in quizzing each other on their experiences and finding other like-minded families and seeing what's worked for them.
That's great. And I know that through that process, Jen, you are actually the one that advocated that, hey, there's this great company, Savvy Learning. I really think we should take a look. I think that this is a powerful tool families may want to consider adding to their toolbox. And Tony, I've heard you talk about how flexible this can be, understanding that many homeschool families are looking for flexible solutions. Tell me more. Tell me more about Savvy Learning. What is it? Why was Jen so excited to add this to the menu of options that families might consider the right solution for them?
Yeah, so at our core, we are a tutoring company. We are 100% online. And we've chosen as a company to be narrowly focused on those things that matter most at the age that matters most. And so for us, that's reading and math at those younger ages. And so we serve ages 4 to 12. A lot of tutoring companies out there will spread themselves thin across all ages, all subjects. We truly believe in building a strong foundation of reading and math. And so that's all we do. And we've also made a choice to do only the things that are effective. It'd be really nice, a gaming app that's all kids did was play games. If that was the best way to help children make progress, great, let's do it. But our founders, when they started this company in 2020, they asked themselves, what are the most effective methods? And the research at that time was pointing to something that was pretty new. Back then, it was called high dosage tutoring, which is a little bit different than standard tutoring. Standard tutoring back then was 1 hour sessions, maybe once or twice a week, usually at a learning center or maybe a tutoring lady down the street or something. But hey, it was the pandemic. Online solutions were a necessity at that time. And in this high dosage tutoring thing was this new idea. So they looked at the research and they saw high dosage tutoring is like far, far better than standard tutoring. And the only difference between standard tutoring and high dosage tutoring is you're taking the 1 or 2 hours of tutoring a week and you're splitting them up into shorter sessions. And so our format for high dosage tutoring is 4 days a week, Monday through Thursday, 25 minutes per day. Well, for children who have short attention spans, this makes a lot more sense because what child is going to have fun while learning to read or do math for 60 minutes? It's really tough. That's tough for me as an adult, let alone for the little kids. The research continues to come out. There's a study done recently that shows high dosage tutoring is 20 times more effective than standard tutoring. That's dramatic. And, I'm not an educator, so I can't go into the science behind why. I wish I could. But what I can tell you is what I've observed. And what I observe is the kids at the end of a session with Savvy, they are hyped. They are having so much fun that they want to come back for the next session. And we've built our own story narrative with these superhero characters we call the Savvy Supers, that's woven into our whole tutoring program. And they're just I need to know what happens next in the Savvy Super story. And they're reading along, they're learning phonics and decoding and comprehension and fluency. They're learning all the things, but they're having fun. And they want to keep coming back. And high dosage is the way to accomplish this. And no matter whether it's a struggling reader or it's a homeschool student who mom is busy with 5 other kids and can't quite be as consistent as she would like on the reading instruction, or it's a child who's actually accelerated and needs to be challenged in a way that a public school classroom cannot challenge them, Savvy is perfect for all of these, because we just meet the child where they're at on their reading or math journey. We assess them, we have years worth of content, and we plug them into the reading or math level where they're at. And from there, the high dosage tutoring thing propels them forward. And it's just a wonderful tool. It can be adapted to your needs as a parent, whatever your situation may be.
I love that. You probably saw me light up when you said not an hour long, 25 minutes long. I spent a portion of my career as a 5th grade teacher, and before that as an elementary music teacher. And my elementary music classes were 25 minutes long, the exact number you just shared, 25 minutes. And I just always felt that was the secret amount, especially for my younger music classes, the 1st graders, the 2nd graders. I thought we can do 25 minutes any longer, and I'm going to lose them. This is not going to work. And then I love that you mentioned, that you do this up through 12-year-old students, and that you've decided to focus on something specific when you said 25 minutes. And these are the age ranges. You saw me light up because I was like, that's perfect. That makes absolute sense with what I have observed. And like I said, across settings, not just in school. When I work with youth in theater, and there'll be other directors who are like, we're going to have a 2-hour rehearsal with the 8-year-olds. And I'm like, you're going to what? You will get them for 30 minutes, 45 if you give them a break halfway in between. If you're expecting them to do any more than that, you might as well just send them home, because they'll get to that point where that's, you used up their peak learning, let it go, try again tomorrow. So, I'm really energized by this concept. That's a terminology I hadn't heard before, but that I'm going to end up using a lot in my life. Nope, we need to do this the high dosage method. Let's cut that down to shorter increments more frequently. That makes so much sense to me.
It's funny how sometimes the research takes a while to catch up with what those of us who work with kids know, right? If you're a parent, you know that doing something more frequently in a shorter time span is what works for your kids, whether it's practicing the piano or swim lessons or anything that you're trying to teach your kid. If you do it in that high dosage method, it's going to work better.
And, as a chief marketing officer at an education company, I've learned that it also comes down to a scalability problem for the education industry. Whether it's the K-12, public school system, or, software, or whatever solution we're looking at to help children learn, there's a scalability issue with something like high dosage tutoring. I look at what legislators and policymakers in the K-12 system are trying to do in that realm. And they have the research showing high dosage tutoring is dramatically better. But how do you scale that across millions and millions of children? High dosage tutoring is not just shorter sessions, at more frequent intervals. It's also smaller groups. And so in schooling, we often think about the teacher to student ratio. We all know that a 1-to-1 ratio is the most ideal, right? If everyone could have a private tutor, I think that learning would be fun for everyone. It would just be perfectly tailored. We all have our mentor, and it would be amazing. But logistically, how do we do that as a society? And so the K-12 system is like, we need more tutors. We need more people to deploy a high dosage format to as many students as possible. And that's how largely, the public school system looks at it. I love the public school system, by the way. I'm a product of it, big advocate for it. I'm an advocate for many different styles of education. But this is where Savvy can really change the game. I usually only hear about high dosage tutoring being talked about in a public school system. And a lot of the solutions out there that offer high dosage tutoring only sell to school districts. And that's what makes Savvy so unique. As far as I know, we are the only online high dosage tutoring option for kids that sells directly to parents. And so that is a game changer. In other terms, this type of product is usually only made available to school districts. And through that, it gets to the children. But therein lies a really interesting value prop for parents. And Jen, I'm curious to get your take on this. I think there's magic that happens when an educator, in this case a tutor, and the student and the parent or guardian are all working together. They're all thinking in the same direction to help the student make progress. I think magic happens there. And when you have high dosage tutoring that is happening through school districts, the parents are not completely left out of the loop, but largely left out of the loop because it's happening at school. The kid comes home from school and mom or dad asks, hey, how was school today? You usually get that answer of like, oh, it was good. And then, the boy wants to go play with Pokemon cards now and doesn't want to tell mom or dad about, oh, I did this and I did that. And I had high dosage tutoring today. And, that's usually not going to come up. And so it's hard for mom or dad or a guardian to know what's going on. But high dosage tutoring through the parent, and it happens at home because it's all online, that just adds another layer of opportunity to make this a very productive experience. And so Jen, I'm curious what you think from your education background. Was it more impactful when the parent was really involved, in a public school setting?
Oh, 100%. I think you look at the schools that are doing well on their report cards or whatever. It's generally because parents are able to be more involved. There's other demographics that play into it. But the students who are more successful are those whose parents know what's going on. They're either able to support them with enrichment activities or support them with tutoring or whatever other supports they need if they're struggling. Yeah, like you mentioned, that parent with a professional, if it's the right fit, is the perfect secret sauce for, I think, all students having. Nobody else cares about your kid more than you do, right? And so if you know what's going on and are advocating for them and fighting for them to get the support that they need with somebody who has that expertise, then, your student has all the opportunities in the world.
Well, this has been such a great conversation. Tony, if families are interested in learning more directly about Savvy Learning, where can they find you, or where should they go to learn more?
Yeah, go right to our website. So that is savvylearning.com. Savvy is spelled SAVVY, savvylearning.com. And it's very easy to get a subscription. So it's kind of like Netflix. You can subscribe to a tutoring course month to month. You can also get discounts for buying, multiple months ahead. Once you sign up, we will start that child off with an assessment. That's free to do. Many other companies actually charge for those assessments. We do not. Yeah, I invite everyone to go to the website and create an account, get that assessment done. It doesn't take a long time. Sit down with your child. We will then know where they're at on reading or math. And you can start with a trial session. Usually costs about $1. We run promos all the time. You can get a discount there. You get a trial session for $1. And then you can just see if you like it. That's the easiest way to get started. And then from there, you'll know if this is a good fit for your child. Most times the child loves that first session. I just invite you to not procrastinate, just do that trial session, get that assessment done. And then as a parent, you'll know what to do next. That's how you do it.
That's great. And Jen, if families are interested in learning more about the curriculum and tools available through OpenEd, which will include next year Savvy Learning, where can they learn more?
Obviously, our website, opened.co. You can also email us directly. My team, you can email at software@opened.co, or you can email help@opened.co, and they can guide you to the right team as well.
Amazing. Well, thank you both for joining me today. Parting thoughts, if you can share one last parting piece of advice to parents who may be worried about addressing learning gaps, or maybe worried about personalized learning at home, maybe worried about they're struggling, what would you say? Let's hear Tony first.
Oh boy, so many different directions I could take that. I think just keep it simple. And what I mean by that is when you're trying to, add on a new tool or, a new curriculum or something, I think really pay attention to how your child reacts to that in the first, day or the first week or whatever. And find those things that the child naturally gravitates towards. And that they want to keep coming back for more. I mean, that's probably the biggest thing. If they want to keep coming back for more, that learning journey starts to become, it goes on cruise control, really. The kid is driving the progress rather than you, the parent, having to drive the progress. And I've just seen that time and time again at Savvy. So I think that's probably the biggest thing for me.
Great. And Jen, parting thoughts?
I would just say don't hesitate to reach out, whether it's to Savvy, whether it's to us at OpenEd. If you're struggling, don't stay in the same loop of trying to fix it yourself. If you feel like you need help, there are people around that are willing to step in and give you the support that you need. So reach out to those experts and get started on an intervention plan for your student.
I love that. Well, thank you again, both of you, for being my guests here today. For everyone who joined in as listeners, hope to see you again here on the OpenEd podcast. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.